This video is a series about the restoration of this Hamilton grade 974 pocket watch. Now, I had bought this pocket watch on eBay a while back, and the seller said it was running, but when I got it, it ran for about 10 minutes and it would stop, and then it would run a little bit longer and stop. So hopefully all it needed was a good cleaning to get it going again. So when I got this watch, it had this plastic crystal on it that was turning green, and it was causing the hands to rust. So I made a video about that problem. And then I made a video on how to disassemble this watch. And then I made a video on pre-cleaning and final cleaning and inspecting all your parts. So in this video series, I'm going to be reassembling this watch, and we're going to be answering that question, will it work now? Also, at the end of this video, I'm going to be giving you some tips that can save you some money for your watch repair. Well, before I start assembling this watch, let's talk about the two oils that I'll be using for the lubrication of the parts of this watch. These are synthetic oils. One is Moebius 9010, the other one is Moebius HP 1300. Now, the reasons we use oil in a watch is to reduce friction, because friction causes the parts to wear, and also the friction causes the watch to slow down. Now, I'm going to be using the HP 1300 on the jewels of the center wheel and the third wheel, and also on the arbor of the mainspring barrel. The 1300 is a little thicker oil, and it can be used on those gears because they spin slower. Now, there's other parts in the watch that also move, and I'll be using the HP 1300 to lubricate those parts too. Now, I'll be using the Moebius 9010 on the fourth wheel jewels, the escape wheel jewels, and the balance jewels, because these wheels spin faster and they need this lighter type oil. Now, any metal parts that slide and rub against each other, to reduce friction, I use this grease, and this is Moebius 9504. Now, here's an example of two metal parts that would be rubbing together in the watch, and I just put a little dab of that grease where the contact points are, and that reduces the friction and reduces the wear of the two metal parts sliding against each other. Now, the method that works best for me for transferring oil from my oil container to my oil pot is I take a needle and put it in a pin vise, and I just dip the needle into the oil container and transfer it to my oil pot. You just use a small amount, just enough that you need for the job that you're doing. You don't want to put a bunch of oil in there because that oil can get contaminated from dust and hair. And always remember to keep the lid closed on your oil pot to keep any the contaminants out of it too. Now, there's a part of the watch that never gets any oil on it, and that's the gear teeth of these gears. You never put any oil on the gear teeth of these three gears here, and these are part of the gear train. You never put any oil on the teeth, and you never put any oil on the pinion of these gears. And the reason is that oil will attract dirt, and the dirt will gum up the gears, and eventually it'll slow down your watch, and then eventually it'll stop your watch. So remember, no oil here and no oil here. And that's just on these gears here. Well, now I'm going to start. The first part is putting the keyless works back into the watch. Now, this isn't the first time I've ever put a watch together, but it's the first time I've ever recorded me putting a watch together, and I had a learning experience on this one, and one of the big issues was keeping my fingers out of the way so you could see what I'm doing. And I learned a lot. I got a little different setup for my next time I do this, so please bear with me. My fingers are blocking and you can't really see what I'm doing, but most of the video I tried to edit out where my fingers were in it, especially when I'm putting the screws in. That's really hard to get a good shot without my fingers in the way. Okay, got that part in. Now I'm going to put a little grease on that part of the spring where it contacts the setting lever. And now I'm going to put in the setting lever. That's kind of unusual that this watch has a setting lever. Most of these grade watches had the pendant set where you pull the winding knob up and set the time with it, but nope, this one has a setting lever where you have to pull that lever out to be able to set your time. Next, I'm going to put this clutch lever spring in. And when I first started this project, I told my wife I'm going to work on this watch and make a video of it, and it's not running. She's like, well, don't you think you should use a watch that's running and take it apart and clean it and put it back together? And I said, no, I'm going to try this one. I'm up for that challenge. So I'm just hoping that this thing's going to run. Well, now we got those two parts together, I'm going to put a little dab of that 9504 grease. You use grease where two parts are going to rub together to reduce friction. And right here I'm using a little bit of oil around those studs where these wheels are going to sit. I'm using Moebius HP 1300. This is for my intermediate wheels. Now 1300 is a little bit heavier oil. Now I'm using this little bit heavier oil because these parts spin slow. They don't spin fast, and they don't need a high velocity oil as some of the other parts do in the watch. Now, sometimes when I'm working on a watch, I like to just kind of think about, my mind kind of wanders, and I think about the history of the watch, and if that watch could only tell the things that it's been through, the history of it and the times. It's just a good thought. Well, I got that yoke. I guess that's called a yoke. I'm not sure what that part's called. Got that yoke put on there. It's all tightened down. Those gears are really small. It's amazing how those watches have such small parts. Now I'm going to put some more of that grease on this winding shaft on all four sides and smear it around. That way when I put on my clutch wheel, it'll slide right on and it'll reduce friction there. Now this part is our winding pinion, and we put 4 little dabs of grease on it. And the reason we put grease on it is because it rubs against another pinion and it has friction on it. So we're going to put a little bit of grease on it. So now it's time to start putting our train wheels back in. This is the escape wheel. You just drop it right in that jewel hole. The next part will be your pallet, and you just put that right there and it drops right into the jewel hole. Make sure it's all set good and firm. Okay, the next part we're going to put on is our pallet bridge. And you want to be very careful in handling this, and just gently set it down on your pallet and make sure everything's lined up, because if you put too much pressure you could break those pivots off the pallet, and that's not a good thing. If you break those, you're going to have a bad day. So just make sure everything's lined up before you put your screws in and start tightening down, and just go slow with it. Well, if you have any comments, please just leave them down in the comment section. I try to check them every day. Well, I really hope I can get this watch running. It's a really nice watch. Now, I also made a video on the case of this watch, where I cleaned it and polished it, and also put a new crystal in, and also I'm going to be putting new hands on the watch. Okay, this next wheel is called a fourth wheel, or that's the wheel that your second hand attaches to. And it just drops right in that jewel hole. It's a pretty easy wheel to get in. Okay, this next wheel I'm putting in is the third wheel. I don't really have to put that wheel in yet, but I like to put it in there because it kind of holds the escape wheel and fourth wheel steady, so I can put this bridge on there and they're not moving around, and it makes it a lot easier to align all my pivots to try to get them through the top jewel holes. So that's why I put that wheel in. I'm going to take it out later, but once I get it all everything lined up, I'll remove that wheel. But once you get all your gears aligned and the pivots are through those jewel holes, that bridge will actually drop down. You'll hear a little click sound, and that lets you know that you got everything aligned, and then you can go ahead and start putting your screws in. And you'll actually be able to see the shiny tips of the pivots poking through the jewels to let you know that they're in there. You want to make sure they're in there, because when you tighten those screws down, you take a big chance of cracking your jewels if those pivots aren't poking through the jewel holes. Well, now we can go ahead and tighten those two screws down good and tight. Well, I think I'm doing a pretty good job of keeping my hands out of the way so you can see the screw heads as I'm turning them. Yeah, that was a big challenge, trying to put these screws in and do it at an angle so the camera could pick them up. Well, now that we got that train bridge, that's what that bridge was called, the train bridge, and the train wheels, and we got all that tightened down. Now I can put my third wheel in. And it drops right in the jewel hole just like the other ones. Now we're going to put our center wheel in. That's our biggest wheel, the center wheel. Now we're going to work on our mainspring. Now I've got a new mainspring for this watch, and I'm going to use my mainspring winder to put it in the mainspring barrel. Now, I've read on Facebook somewhere where mainsprings are getting hard to find, and I think that's true because I've been looking for one for South Bend Railroad pocket watch for a long time and haven't found one yet. So this is my mainspring winder. It's an old antique one. I guess you call it antique or vintage, but it works pretty good. It's got a little bit of wear and tear on it, but it does the job. So the first thing you need to do is find the right, I guess you call that a hub, that fits inside your barrel, one that's not too loose and one that's not too tight. And this one here looks like that's the perfect fit right there. You want one that'll slide inside your barrel of your mainspring barrel. Then you attach that hub to the mainspring winder. Now you look at the mainspring and you see that little cutout that's in there, that little hole. And that's where our mainspring winder is going to attach. That little stud that's on the end of this goes into the little hole that's on that mainspring. And it locks it in. And when it's locked in, you just turn the mainspring winder, and it starts winding up your mainspring, and it puts it inside that hub. And you keep winding around, it gets tighter and tighter. And that's how it works. Now when your mainspring gets all wound up in that hub, you just take your mainspring barrel and fit it over that hub, and then you push out with that shaft of the mainspring winder, and it pushes the mainspring into the barrel. So now we're going to go ahead and do it for real now. We're going to wind up our mainspring and put it in the mainspring barrel. Now getting this mainspring winder all set up is a challenge in itself. I guess it's just too many moving parts for me, but I struggle with it most of the time, and I wonder how many watchmakers just went and wound up a mainspring by hand and put it in the barrel and didn't really bother with something like this. But this is the correct way to do it. Now as you're winding your mainspring up, you got to keep your thumb up against that hub, because if you don't, you take a chance of that spring popping out, and it's under a lot of tension, and if it would to pop out while you were doing that, you could hurt yourself. So make sure you keep your thumb up against it and slowly wind it up until you get right to the end. And then as you get close to the end, you stop. Well, once you got your mainspring all wound up in that hub, you put your mainspring barrel over the top of it and hold it up there firmly, and you just push out on the shaft that'll push the mainspring into your mainspring barrel, and it releases it, and it just pushes it right into it like a plunger. There you have it. We have our mainspring in our mainspring barrel. Now I have to oil my mainspring, and I use clock oil, and I just put 4 little drops on around the mainspring, and that oil will soak right in. It's capillary action, where it just pulls it on down into the coils of the mainspring. That's all it takes. Next thing we're going to do is fit our barrel arbor in. That went in nicely. One part I forgot to show was I put a little bit of oil on that arbor too. I used the HP 1300 on the arbor. Now I'm going to put the cover back on the barrel of the mainspring barrel. I use this little tool here to push the cover on. It works pretty good most of the time. Okay, now it's time to put these jewels back in. These are the lower balance jewels. You got the on the left side is the cap jewel, on the right side is the jewel that has the little hole in it that the pivot goes through, and I put a little drop of Moebius 9010 oil on there, just a little drop. Then I take the cap jewel and set it on top of the lower jewel, which has the hole in it, and carefully drop it into the hole where the jewels go. And I just gently push them in with a little piece of pegwood. Put my screws in to hold it down, and everything will be buttoned up, ready to go. Now if you like these videos about pocket watches, subscribe to my channel. I try to put one out once a week. I have videos on how to wear pocket watches, how to clean pocket watches, just general information about them. Well, now it's time to put that mainspring barrel in that has that brand new mainspring in it. You just slide it in, maneuver it around, and it should drop right in. It's pretty easy to get in. Now we're going to put our barrel bridge on. Line everything up, gently maneuver it around where all your pivots are going through your jewels. Drop in those screws and tighten that down. Now I use a piece of pegwood to hold that bridge down so nothing shifts around while I'm tightening down my screws. So now it's time to put in the click, and I take a little bit of that Moebius 1300 and put around that stud that the click sets on, and I put a little dab of grease on the spring where it's going to rub metal to metal, because you always want to put wherever there's metal to metal rubbing, touching each other, you want to put just a little bit of the grease there, not too much, just a little spot of it. Well, I'm trying to maneuver that click in. It's giving me a little fit. That spring kind of keeps it from setting in good, so I have to use a piece of pegwood. But it got in there. We put our screw in, tighten it down, and everything will almost be ready to start oiling this watch. Okay, next I'm going to put in my upper crown wheel. This is all part of the winding mechanism. Well, so far everything's going good. All the parts are fitting in. I haven't had any parts fly away on the floor and me crawling around on my hands and knees looking for them. That usually is the case. I have at least one or two parts that'll do that. But what I use is sometimes when it happens, I use a magnet, and I'll scoot it across the floor and find any of the metal parts. And of course, I demagnetize my watches after I'm done servicing them anyways. So what do you guys use if something like that happens? You could leave a comment in the comment section and let me know. You might have a better idea than what I do. Now we're going to put our ratchet wheel in. Well, now we got our ratchet wheel set in place. We'll put this little washer that goes on top of it, and then we'll put our screw in and tighten that down. Okay, now it's time to work on the balance. I'm putting a tiny drop of oil of the Moebius 9010 on top of the cap jewel, and gently going to lay it over on top of the bottom jewel, and then fit it into my balance bridge. Now this is where I had a little bit of problem with things, but that's for a different video. I had a problem with the balance, but I'm going to save that for another video. But right now I'm just going to push the jewels in with a piece of pegwood. Get it seated down in there as good as I can. Put my screws back in to hold that jewel in place. It's a little shaky. These are the smallest screws I've ever worked with. Okay, now it's time to put our balance onto our balance bridge. You see that little piece I'm pointing to? That's called a hairspring stud, and that has to slide in there in that slot right there. So we're going to gently flip the balance over, take that stud and try to maneuver it into that little slot. So the next thing I'll do is I'll take my tweezers and gently push that hairspring stud in and make sure it's seated good and firm. That way I can take and flip it over, and I put it on this piece of pith wood because it's really soft and won't take a chance of damaging my balance staff, the pivots on it, because this stuff is so soft. Now I tighten these two screws down that hold that hairspring stud down and make sure it's good and secure. This is the last part of working on the balance. So now I'm going to work on the dial side of the movement and start putting some oil and grease on the parts that are needing that. First I put some oil on the post for the minute wheel, and I'm using the Moebius 1300, which is a little bit thicker oil than the Moebius 1090. And then I put a little dab of grease where any parts that rub metal to metal, or any metal touches other metal and slides across it, I use the grease, and I'm using that Moebius 9504 grease for any of those parts. Well, now I'm going to place the Canon pinion on. Now the minute wheel goes on. Now, if you enjoy pocket watches, working on pocket watches, looking at pocket watches, subscribe to my channel. I try to put out a new video once a week, and you can get notifications, and also hit that like button if you like this content. Well, the last wheel to go on is the hour wheel. We got that set. All our wheels are on there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the setting mechanism, pull out the lever, the setting lever, put my bench tool in there and turn it and see if, yeah, it looks like everything's going to work good. The setting lever sets and everything. So we're good on that part. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put the dial on to keep those wheels from falling off. I just press it on and find the holes and line them up that holds the dial on, and tighten down the screws that hold the dial on. Well, now we have the moment of truth. I'm going to slide that balance in and see if this watch is going to work. Get it lined up, slide it in, gently drop it down. Well, it started right up. That's great. Yeah, man. Well paid off hard work. Now all I got to do is I'll take my piece of peg wood, hold it down a little bit, get it lined up, gently maneuvering it around, testing it. And I'll drop my screw in. I use the peg wood to help hold the balance down, so when I tighten my screw it doesn't shift it around. I apologize, my hand's in the way, of course. There it goes, it's running good. Well, now it's time to start oiling the movement. The center wheel gets Moebius 1300, and also the third wheel gets the Moebius 1300. You remember that's the little bit thicker oil, and the reason we use the little thicker oil on these wheels is they don't turn as fast, and they don't need a thin oil like the other gears do. Okay, now I'm going to oil the fourth wheel and the escape wheel, and I'm using the Moebius 9010, which is the thinner oil, and it's for the gears that turn fast. Well, to answer that question at the beginning of the video, will it work now? Looks like it's working pretty good. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just resetting my regulator that I had moved earlier in the video, putting it back into the middle. Well, at the beginning of this video, I was going to give you a tip to save you some money on your watch repair. Well, this is my tip for you. What I do is I go on eBay and I buy these little vials of oil for a fraction of the price that I would be paying for those larger bottles of oil that are really expensive. So that's my money saving tip for you. You can find them on eBay, and I hope this helps you out.